Hey everyone, my name is Jared Evans, a fellow graduate student here with you all in Liberty University. I am presenting Chapter 14 out of our text, which is Part Organizational Structure and Design. Let's move forward. So the introduction to this chapter: an organization's structure affects its performance by influencing how it operates. The wrong organizational structure can hamper communication and slow work processes. Effective organizational structures improve the working efficiency of the organization, motivates employees rather than frustrate them, and facilitates working relationships among employees and across organizational units. So basically we're going to be talking about efficiency of organizational structures, how they're built, what all goes into it, and how they're designed. So basically Chapter 14 is all about structure and how that structure is built and how employees and leaders can respond to that structure. So let's move forward. So, organizational structure. There are two key terms we're going to focus on within this slide, and the first one is organizational design, and that's the process of selecting and managing aspects of organizational structure and culture to enable the organization to achieve its goals. Designing and redesigning the organization in response to internal and external changes is a key managerial function. And one of the most important outcomes of organizational design is organizational structure, or the formal system of task, power, and reporting relationships. The second definition is organizational structure, which is created by organizational design, and it's the core of what coordinates, controls, and motivates employees to cooperate towards the attainment of organizational goals. When the organizational structure is aligned with the needs, it results in greater organizational efficiencies and less conflict, which is something that all leaders would strive to achieve within their organizations. And the text wants us to kind of focus on two different organizations for this. So imagine one that you have the CEO that kind of makes all the decisions, and imagine one in which the CEO takes decisions from the board collectively and everybody's input has a say. And that's basically what's going to go on within this structure. We're going to look at all the different types of organizations and how they're built and what may or may not work for each one. So, the determinants of organizational structure. And in this slide we've grabbed table 14.2 from our text, and it lists all the determinants, which is business strategy, external environment, nature of the organization's talent, organizational size, expectations of how employees should behave, organization's production technology, and organizational change. And these are 7 key factors of organizational structure. This presentation alone is kind of going to focus on all the structures and how they're built, but I would highly encourage looking at this table to see the examples and what goes into determining an organizational structure. Let's move on. So the types of organizational structures: we have the pre-bureaucratic structure, which is for smaller organizations with low standardization, total centralization, and mostly one-on-one communication. This is best for simple tasks and entrepreneur organizations, as the founder is able to control the decisions and growth. The bureaucratic structure: it's one in which the formal division of labor, hierarchy, and standardization of work procedures are all in place. The formal division of labor, hierarchy, and standardizations allow for employees to follow written rules. I can personally relate to that within the Army. Totally bureaucratic, a lot of rules, everybody's got to follow them. Side note about the bureaucratic structure is the greater importance placed on employees higher in the structure is reflected in centralized decision making, but has a strict chain of command. And again, I know firsthand how that feels. Moving on, we have the functional structure, groups of people with the same skills or who use similar tools or work processes together into departments. Career paths within each function are clear, and employee skill development tends to be in-depth but focused on a particular function. The divisional structure: we have a collection of functions organized around a particular geographic area, product or service, or market. And this is common among organizations with many products or services. So the divisional structure, you're thinking about the bigger companies like, say, Apple, Google, Microsoft, where you're going to see the same type of structure no matter where you go across the coast, because they're everywhere. And so they want that structure to be the same no matter which location you're in. So then we have the matrix structure, and in this structure employees report to both a project or product team and to a functional manager. So employees represent their functions, and it allows the team to kind of be very effective in that everybody knows their skill and their abilities, but it does allow for a complex environment because now employees are reporting to more than one boss. The team-based structure is horizontal or vertical teams define part or all of the organization. Performance team members from different functions are permanently assigned to the project and or product team and do not report to a second manager or a second boss. So the next slide we have the example of the matrix structure, which is figure 14.5 from our text. I wanted to include this to kind of show how employees can get caught up in the matrix and how they are basically responding to more than one boss, and it can get confusing because obviously you want to focus on one task at a time. Even though we usually all are managing more than one at work, it's hard to report to more than one boss with all these different tasks, and that's basically why I wanted to include this, to show the complexity of it. So continuing the structures, we then have the lattice structure, which is cross-functional and cross-level subteams are formed and dissolved as necessary to complete specific projects and tasks. There is no fixed or assigned authority, and goals are set by the same people who are accountable for making them happen. And the network organization, it's a collection of autonomous units or firms that act as a single larger entity using social mechanisms for coordination and control. This is best for functions that don't require frequent exchanges, and the lattice structure is more common in consulting firms and organizations. So contemporary issues in organizational structure, we have 4 key factors here that we're kind of working on. It's virtual organizations, mechanisms for integrating employees, communities of practice, effects of restructuring on performance. So virtual organizations, basically what it says it is, organizations that are contracted out pretty much all virtually, where you have members in different locations working on specific tasks, and that can be an issue because now you're having to try and make sure everybody gives you information at a certain point in time and that everybody's up to date. The integrating employees are often divided into segmentation by what they can do well and maybe different characteristics of what makes them important as an employee, and finding how employees fit into their own personal level can be an issue. Communities of practice, I personally know about this well. The text actually loosely gives a great example that I relate to in field technicians. I used to work for Spectrum, and I was a field tech, would go throughout homes and install cable services, and we often had communities of practice, which aren't really recognized within the structure, but it's basically where if I had a problem, I could call one of the techs that had been there longer, and they could help me out. That way I wouldn't have to go to the boss and kind of go back and forth with them. I could just go to an employee first and see what they had done in the past. And this is often found in many organizations. And restructuring on performance, I can relate to this as well because in the Army, leadership often changes. And that's obviously very stressful for employees involved, and it's something that can cause a lot of stress and concern because you want employees to have the same great morale, but with leadership always changing, they want to do their own thing, so it's hard for everybody to always be on the same page, and that's an issue in the workplace for today. And summary, so though there are many different forms of organizations and structures, each one must decide what works best for them. A key feature that remains the same is teamwork is key and vital to the success of an organization. Without successful leadership to implement structures, organizations will fail, and organizations and employees can learn from internal networks and prepare for future success themselves. And finally, we will be moving on to the discussion question. If you wanted employees to work collaboratively and minimize conflict, what organizational structure would you consider adopting and why? Which structures would you avoid and why? I really look forward to hearing your answers on this. I think it's something for many of us to think about if we want to go into the business sector of communications, or even just discuss what's going on in your personal business at your company. So I'm very much looking forward to your answers on this. Finally, the reference is only our text. All the tables were derived from it. All text was derived from it. along with personal examples I mentioned. And finally, that is the end of my presentation. I thank you all for listening to this. I know I'm a very fast talker. I just feel like, excuse me, I have a lot of information and I wanted to kind of jam-pack it in there as much as possible. So I hope it was easy to understand. I thank you for watching this, and I hope you all have a great one. Bye.